Just a few thoughts. Once upon a time, in my 20s, at a very, crucial time during which I was manifesting, and maybe I was in manifestor consciousness. I was a lot of things were coming to fruition. A lot of seeds that I had planted that had been germinating were finally manifesting and materializing. And I was only surrounded by those who were transforming and evolving and growing, and that was the world in which I lived. And at that moment, I had a family member who had recently been through a divorce, so I gave her some slack for her cynicism, pessimism, and she basically said, "Oh, people don't change." And I, of course, fought it tooth and nail, at least in my head. I didn't challenge her on it because of her divorce, but I thought, well, that's not my experience. I'm only surrounded by people that regularly transform and evolve. All these decades later, at 53, I of course understand what she's saying, and I can't argue with her experience or her worldview, but I think there's a lot to be examined there and unpacked. I hate that word. Maybe temperament and disposition remain the same, and the rationalizations for the same old nature evolve. That's another cynical way of looking at it. But I now think, even though I grew out of this, that some people just are regularly transforming and evolving, and others don't have as great a capacity for change. I think that's pretty clear. And I used to think some people are just simply not lucid about the spiritual journey, and they're sort of zombies or walking zombies, or they're on autopilot, and others are lucid about it. And then I grew out of that and I said, no, we're all learning the same spiritual lessons in life. It just looks different on different people. I might be back to the idea that some have a capacity to transform and evolve and change, and some don't. And here's the reason, or here's one way of looking at things. The invisible realm of Hades, I was just re-listening to, a whole segment I did on that for my channel, Beyond Craft. And it was largely about how the original word for Hades, Hades, means when you refer to Pluton or Plutus or Hades, the place or the figure who rules it, all refer to the giver of wealth, or Hades is the invisible realm. So when you put the two together, or at least so went the presentation, it indicates that, the richness in life is in the invisible realm. So I was also pointing out that artists regularly are abducted to Hades to dwell in that space where germination takes place, right? Where the roots grow deeper during barren winters and germinate and then sprout in the form of inspiration. In the presentation, I also pointed out that is the definition of the creative process. So artists regularly dwell, right, in this realm where all wealth and richness lies, from which all inspiration derives. But then I thought, another worldview that I hold is that we're all creative beings, and artists have no monopoly on that. So truly, I believe, that which doesn't evolve begins to die or become extinct. And, on a micro level, if you don't evolve, you sort of are not as adaptable, and eventually it catches up with you. On a macro level, of course, same thing. If you don't introduce random variations into the gene pool, a population will eventually become extinct. So transformation is the key to proliferation, propagation, to life. And that goes for the moral realm, the invisible moral realm, as well as the sort of mechanistic level. So if you look at it that way, we are wired to transform and evolve or perish. So those that don't have a healthy relationship with the creative process are not self-creating on a daily basis in order to be adaptable. There's no brain plasticity. There's no evolution of ideas. They're sitting ducks for any, you name it, disease that comes along, any sort of counterproductive thought, or the emotional experiences that get mapped. If they're never sort of disentangled, those neural circuits, then they have their way with you. And that can be just cortisol and adrenaline, meaning stress, or it can be the long-term effects of carrying that over into daily life as chronic stress, and that would be, varying degrees of PTSD. So if you're not self-creating if you're not regularly processing your emotional experiences and the thoughts, the runaway thoughts that you have, then you're not engaging in the creative process and you're not bringing to fruition all that's germinating in that invisible realm. So whether you're an artist or not, you are meant to be doing that and you're wired to be doing that for the evolution of the species. So not everybody needs to be a sculptor or a painter or send a rocket into space, but they are meant to self-create. And that is something I'm very passionate about. It sounds lofty, but we're all meant to self-create in that we're meant to take thought forms and assimilate them and synthesize them and create new cutting-edge thought forms and contribute them back into the collective. For our own survival, we're meant to process our emotional experiences and learn to master our runaway thoughts so that we can transform on the regular. We're meant to have catharsis regularly and transform as a result. I hope that makes sense. It just all kind of clicked. And, I've given lip service to the idea that we're all creative beings and we're all wired for the creative process, and yet we're socially conditioned in some cases to have a less than healthy relationship with the creative process. Well, what clicked is why we're wired for the creative process. And I just sort of gave it to you right there. Hope it all makes sense.